Hey, you know what? I just find it fascinating that both of us were looking at the same realistic thing of how are we going to feed these people?
Hmm.
Where is all the poop going to go?
Are we just the buzzkills in life, Sean? Where we're just looking at all the shit that can go wrong when people tell us a good piece of news. First thing
Yeah,
that
but
crossed
is
my
it?
mind when they told me that India was going to be like number two in 2075, I'll be like, I just looked at
Yeah,
someone and I was like, oh shit, I'll be dead by then. Who gives a fuck? And I
right.
walked out.
So hey man, I just look at it and go, being the biggest isn't the best. You know, that
Hmm.
just means money is in control of everything at that point. Not that it
Yeah.
isn't already, but look, we've made some huge mistakes here in America, and we can't even fess up to making them, much less fucking fixing them. You know, I mean, it's a great country, it's a great idea, everything else. You guys are transferring from an old country to a new
Hmm.
country, and that's even weirder.
Yeah. I think this
Yeah.
last section, because we're less than a minute, I can use as the intro for the entire show since we seem to have wrapped it up.
Okay, so we're gonna cover the you're gonna be the biggest economy in the world in 2070, right?
75. Close enough.
So close enough. How many people do you think you'll have by then, honestly?
At our current growth rate, at least somewhere between 2.5 to 3 billion would be my guess.
Right. How are you gonna feed everybody?
See, here's the problem when you start quantifying economies by GDP alone, you forget
Yeah.
about all the other aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you like? I grumble about last week. I was complaining to you about how it took me like an hour and a half to get down the road 5 miles.
Yeah. I mean, welcome to New York City. I mean,
Hmm.
that literally is New York City. So the thing that I would say to you, and I don't know if it was you or somebody else that told me this quote for India creates 100 engineers for every lawyer that they create,
Hmm.
and America creates 100 lawyers for every engineer they create. And I don't know if that's accurate, but it's a pretty good term because we do not put emphasis on the engineering aspect, and you all do.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I don't doubt that you will be the next economic powerhouse just because of the two parents, one child deal in China. So they're just not going to grow by people. You
Hmm.
guys obviously are not using that same policy. So, those things turn out to matter. You're just going to have raw labor. How do you
Yeah.
how do you educate and how do you feed what you think you're going to need?
To be honest with you, that would be far more challenging than anything. Back
Right.
in, I think this was like in the early, must be in the 70s or the 80s. There was a German scientist from America. I can't
I don't
remember
think you
his
should
name.
ever say, you should just never say German scientist.
Okay,
Everybody
a
bows their
Nazi
head
all
and goes,
imported.
somebody from Central Europe that was a scientist.
So he was the one who invented a different strain of genetically modified wheat. Okay.
Okay.
India was about to go into a famine and
Yeah.
technically like kill off a large part of the population. But he came up with this wheat that grew shorter and
Right.
more compact, but produced the same output that the taller plants would produce, which means
Okay.
that you could plant more in a field
Right.
and they didn't tip over when the wind blew. So they would
Oh,
just
wow.
grow straight right next to people. And he was the
Nice.
one who prevented that entire famine from coming because during the British rule, all our food was just taken and given away to the war, right? So
Yeah.
that was the guy who technically prevented us from dying off, I guess, at that point into starvation.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ireland lost 25% of the population because England took all the food. Same story. I don't know why anybody has any animosity towards them. I just don't know. And they don't give a shit.
I know.
Literally, they don't give a shit. Yeah, we did all these terrible things. So what? Okay, so when somebody's just doing GDP numbers, so I have this weird thing that I tie every business contract I have to the
Mm-hmm.
consumer price index because the
Yeah.
consumer price index really doesn't flow much and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
include groceries and gas. And that's the stuff that freaks everybody out when it goes up or down. And the
Yeah.
first time I ever did it, this guy was like, okay. And then eventually I had one landlord go, what is this CPI thing? I said, oh, it's the consumer price index, because it sounds innocuous. You just go, oh, it's some measurement of how society's doing. Well, if it's doing better, rent will go up. And if it's doing worse, rent will go down. It's about stagnant. So instead of signing a 10-year lease with a gradual increase, you got a 10-year lease, it's probably not going anywhere. It's a pretty shrewd move.
Kind of a fixed
So-
thing.
So my thing, I mean, and I'm going to try to say this delicately because I don't want any audience members thinking I'm a complete jackass, but Texas is the size of 5 states. So I'm guessing maybe one large area in southern India, but they are our production area, them in California. California is the 3rd biggest economy in the world right now.
Yeah.
Just the state of California.
Mhm.
Both of them have electrical issues. They could not or would not build their infrastructure to match their needs. How do you stay ahead of that?
I don't know whether like this is a projection based on a bet that technology and agriculture will catch up to the population. But even if we have to import all the grains that we need for the additional number of people that are produced between now and 2075, what the hell does that do to the foreign deficit, and what happens to the currency valuation, which will technically fuck with your GDP, wouldn't it? If you have all of those issues. If you just focus on consumer spending, people are gonna keep buying shit because now they're more exposed to more ideas and more products than they ever were.
Right. So that would be us, pre-World War. People don't really understand. So America was poor before World War I. And it wasn't World War I that made us the richest country in the world. It was World War II. And I'm still not sure we're the richest country in the world, but we took all of England's money. All of it. And left them broke. And there's no better feeling in the entire world than to just every single penny they had, we took. Now, we did have a few people die over there from getting into the war, but that is where the American economy exploded, because we could do manufacturing way better than they could. But so right now, you guys are doing manufacturing brilliantly, but I also see videos of people making food on the floor with their feet in their hands. So you got both things. I mean, just in truthfulness, you got both things happening. So are you dealing with, you go out to a basic flat plot of land, there's no electrical, no gas or anything, and you build the factory there because nothing else is already there? Because the thing we could do in America is they just ran over the indigenous tribes, but there was no infrastructure. So you could build anything you wanted and not have to worry about repairing it or anything for a while. And I'm wondering if you're in that part, or like England, where every time they put a bite of a piece of equipment in the ground, they ran into an artifact, and then they'd have to stop for 6 months or a year to figure out whether that was big enough to not continue the project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Here, it's actually weird because that's why the city keeps expanding further and further away what used to be the heart of the city. So when I first met you, we used to live in a part of town called Frasertown, which was kind of like the center of Bangalore. Like right now, there are like neighborhoods like 25 kilometers in one direction and the other direction that look just like Frasertown.
Okay, well.
So if you look at the downtown areas, Bangalore probably has like 6 different downtowns.
Wow.
That's how it's spread out. Yeah, so as the time has progressed, all the areas that we looked at and we were like, oh shit, this is just fields and forests. Now there are like multiplexes and malls and IT companies and all of that. And the government does a pretty decent job with that at times, because they will kind of like designate an area saying that, hey, we're going to put roads and electricity and all of this shit here, but this is only for companies to come in and invest and build their factories. So they set up, like the special economic zones, they call it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, we do the same thing for tax breaks and incentives, same deal. we'll provide
Mhm.
your infrastructure if you come in. So is that why you guys are so comfortable in Houston then? Because it's the only city I know in America that has two full downtowns, and it's
Mhm.
spread out over 100 damn miles. I mean, it's insane.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty
Wow.
sure
'Cause
that's why the Indian population there is so happy with it.
yeah, and you can handle the heat where we can't handle the heat. So wow,
Mhm.
God, that's fascinating. So I still go back to what do you do with the refuse of almost 2 billion? You know, you're 2 billion
Mhm.
now. Another 500 million humans create a lot of pollution. So
Yeah.
obviously, global warming, even for people that were anti-global warming people, have kind of shut the fuck up at this point. I mean, they literally are
Mhm.
like, "This weather sucks." Um, so do you guys do any projections of where you can like move to? Because like I have to be honest with you, global warming has been pretty good for Oklahoma. Our weather's
Yeah,
better. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean
that's
it's
what I
going to have
noticed. Like
areas it helps.
2010, when I first came to Oklahoma, to when I came, like 2020 maybe, the weather was
Right,
way better. We didn't have like really bad winters ever after the first
right.
2 years I
Yeah,
was there. The
yeah,
same
and
thing here.
summer's nowhere near as bad. Yeah,
Yeah, the same thing here. I like the temperature is changing, and we are supposed to have like one of the biggest um what is that, refugee population, like people who are displaced.
refugees. Yeah,
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 like people who are displaced from it should be the Sundarbans, which is like a coastal area toward the east of India,
right.
where it is basically like tidal forests. And
Oh
the
wow.
only thing that stops the flooding and all of that nonsense were these forests, that mangrove forests that grow
Yeah,
alongside, similar to like what we have in
right.
Florida.
Florida.
And
I know. Right.
yeah, and those things slowly are disappearing. And they say that it would probably displace close to, I think it was 100 to 200 million people.
Wow. God,
Hmm.
I didn't. And just think our population's only 310 or 320 here. Jesus.
Yeah.
So I have friends that live in Florida, own property in Florida and everything else, and people are still moving there. You go,
Hmm.
okay. I don't even know what to say to people and shit like that's nuts to me. I mean, literally, that's nuts to me. Um, I don't know. I guess that's my biggest thing is you just have such a volume of people. It'd be interesting to me to get an army or, well, army would probably be the best quartermaster and say what is necessary for
Hmm.
200 million people because that computer program has not been written yet.
Oh no, like that would be an interesting question even to figure out, like what are the
Yeah,
requirements to
right.
meet, to feed, to clothe, to
Right.
give them electricity,
Yeah,
gas, transportation,
right.
all of that shit to become the second largest
Yeah,
economy by 2075. Like, what are the steps
right.
you need to take to that? Is what I find it mind blowingly.
Right. So
I don't know what the
Canada,
answer.
well, Canada's doing their infrastructure because they assume they're getting a bunch of people from here, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and probably they have an enormous Asian population, so probably from over there. But they're building up hospitals and everything else now, which is a pretty smart move. But hospitals are incredibly costly to run in the meantime. So I don't know. I mean, that is my curiosity on the whole thing. When I read the article, I was like, well, I'm not surprised. I mean, there's just the bulk of people there.
Mm-hmm.
But now I would also say, so if we have another world war between now and 2075,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that works out because you guys will have the bulk of people needed. So
Yeah.
you either become America to World War II and take everybody's money, which would be the biggest opportunity. I mean, I'd be building and investing in ammunitions at this point, which I
Like
know
right
that
now,
sucks, but
oh, it is so weird. Like the military deals that India signs up for, like we do like get a lot of defense equipment from like France and
yeah,
all of the European nations. And now we've
yeah,
started building our own and beefing up the way we do that. But
right,
infrastructure has been like the biggest spend for the past
yeah,
couple of years, where they're trying to connect every remote part of India. They recently ordered for like 25 of those bullet trains from a company in Japan.
Oh,
So
wow.
they're going to start using them here. Now it's like,
Hmm.
oh wow, this is going to be fascinating to see because it's a
Yes,
that cultural disparity of some people who are still living like how they did from when I remember as a kid.
right. Yeah,
They've still stayed that way, and
yeah,
the rest of India is just moving really fast.
right. So I would say Ireland, when I
Mm-hmm.
first went over there, was my father's Ireland. They were still living the same way in all of the
Mm-hmm.
rural areas. And holy crud, you wouldn't recognize the two major cities. And you know, and that's the micro deal for
Mm-hmm.
you guys to look at. That wouldn't even I just look at your scale and go, I don't know how anybody scales up that big. You know,
See, the
I
weird
just
part is
don't
I
know.
think because we're neighbors with China, I wonder whether we look at a lot of things that they do beside like their weird policies on kids and shit.
Yeah, yeah,
That is kind of like they really like shot themselves in the foot by implementing such a
yeah,
stringent measure back in what was it,
right.
the 90s or something like that.
Yeah, but you just go eventually, you're just going to have this big gap in population. I mean, look,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're suffering from it in America. I am 60 years old next month, so I am the last of the it's all about me generation. I mean, and I don't even consider myself to be part of that, but evidently I am because it was the explosion of families. And
Mm-hmm.
then what? We are already short labor here, and one political side uses all of their energy to blame it on brown people. You
Yeah.
know, they used to blame it on black people 50 years ago, but it's brown people's fault now. And you go, no, we just won't do the math. So my family, we had 7 kids. So if those 7 had 7, we'd be up to 49, right? No, those
Mm-hmm.
7 had 7. So we're up to 14, but the original 7 are going to die. So we are not growing at any level that's worth even talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we also won't let the immigrants in that we need.
Oh yeah.
It's so I think there's a plausible deniability there where you go, how do you keep labor down? Well, don't let them be legal. Still going to let them
Mm-hmm.
in, and kind of a little wink and turn your head. But how are you going to make that? How are you going to make that work? And I think we have lost a whole ton of like my son Kyle's generation, the 20 to 25-year-olds with fentanyl. I mean, and
Oh yeah.
not maybe our best and brightest, but the most educated.
Mm-hmm. Oh
And
yeah.
I
Those that Sackler family really did a number on population growth, didn't they?
Oh yeah, those fuckers. Yeah. And you know, none of them are going to go to jail for it or anything. I mean, but that
Mm-hmm.
that is our history. I mean, that's the and I know we've talked about this before. The cash crop that built America was tobacco. And if you had tobacco seeds, this is when Spain was still in control of part of our country, it was a death sentence because that's how much government made off the addiction of tobacco. You know, and
Yeah.
we're just still rolling along that same line. We don't. I got to figure out a way to bring that into a talk I'm doing on this coming Saturday. You know, we've played on and made fortunes off of addictions forever here, and we learned it off of your lovely conquering people, the Brits. So
That's the weird part, right? We went from tobacco to coffee to
yeah,
alcohol
right,
to
heroin, cocaine, and
Mhm.
then back around again. Now we've packaged alcohol up into everything sweet and delicate, you know. And women always had a really low alcoholism rate, and their alcoholism rate is the one that's growing. And as
Mhm.
traditional family caretakers, that's really a way to chop into your society quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, Sean. Like any day of the week or even on the weekend, most of the popular bars here would be packed to the brim. Like there's a
Yeah,
wait to get a table. And those
God,
are
isn't that
all
crazy?
yeah, like before, like growing up, it was such a taboo thing to drink here,
Like,
like
same with
culturally,
me.
that
Yeah,
it would be like dingy little dens where people will park their car
right.
like a mile away and run through the back door and all of that nonsense.
Right. Yeah. So Irish people obviously drink more than most people. So we didn't have that. We had public drinking was taboo. Like it was
Mhm.
illegal to have a 6 pack of beer in your car. You couldn't buy beer in Kansas on Sunday or Missouri. So you'd have to kind of smuggle it in, but it was a huge fine and whatnot. we have gone from that to in Oklahoma we have weed on every corner, literally, which for a couple of seeds back 30 years ago, you go to jail for 2 years. I mean, I don't know where this, but it's the ebb and flow of politics. This will all eventually move back to the conservative version, which I think we're pretty much there, as I believe you and I are going to talk about on Wednesday.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too.
Holy Jesus! So,
by the way, did you see that? Oh, I was going to tell you. Did you see the news report about India launching that rocket to the moon on a moon mission?
Yeah. The one we saw the movie.
Can you believe this, Sean? Like the biggest factoid that I found was that this entire mission, I think it cost close to $75 million. All right.
Wow. Yeah.
The movie Gravity cost $100 million to produce.
Oh no. The movie about movie. Well, so I would say you look at that movie. I saw it with you. Who else was with us? There's like 3 or 4 of us that went and saw that movie.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Anyway, so we go see the movie, and I look at that and go, that's the future of manufacturing. It isn't Elon Musk's version. Mm-hmm. You give every country the ability to get their own satellite up there eventually. That is a business waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm. Like considering how cheap India has been doing it, I'm pretty sure that we would be like competing with Elon Musk's rocket at some point in the future for the same contracts that, okay, we'll do it for $75 million. Give it to us and we put it in space and come back.
Right. I mean, you think about that, that's there. And the other money that's there to be made is collecting space junk. Mm-hmm. And if you can make that and produce that for $75 million and eventually make it where it comes back and lands and all that stuff like he does, which obviously you have the engineering for that. It's just a matter of producing it over and over. And if I remember correctly, it was mostly recycled plastics that you were using.
Yeah.
So how do you go up there with the big net like they do in the ocean and collect the stuff? I mean, that is where the trillions of dollars are to be had, because eventually that shit's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Like some company can probably figure out a way to. Can they use like a giant magnet and at least get all the metal out of the atmosphere that's
right and just space? Drag it behind? Right. So I'm sure Tata Motors is looking at something like that. That's probably your guy. But if you think about it, I mean that's a brilliant company that's grown, and you literally now own the crown jewels of British automaking, which I think would be Land Rover. Everyone would say Rolls Royce, and you go, now I've seen one Rolls Royce in Oklahoma, and it was silly looking, like it was silly. It was an SUV, and it was like, that is ghetto looking for a probably $400,000 car.
You remember my old boss? His father had a Rolls Royce Phantom.
Oh, you're kidding me! Oh God. I just think in a town like this, no one cares. I mean, they really don't care. They're like, oh, neat, and then we turn our head and move on. I was always surprised when I would see rich people, really, legitimate rich in the billions, driving their own car. You go, hey man, at some point you should probably let somebody else drive and do, get whatever you need done in the back seat.
do you know with like our population growth, like speaking of cars, like. I was looking at Paris, where they are planning to tax or pay for parking in the streets of Paris based on the size and weight of your car. So if you buy a fucking SUV, smart. It's your own damn fault. Yeah. I want them to start doing that here. There is hardly any room.
So were you still in London when you guys did the circle system where you had to pay £7? £7 to the inner circle, and I think it was 3.5 or £4 on the outside, which is why we always took the trains in. I just know it wasn't huge, but it was nominal, and it was a real easy way to slow traffic. To speed up traffic, because I could take a train for £4 or £5, and all that other stuff.
That same system is here, but it's free. Like we have all around Bangalore something known as the Ring Road. Okay, it's a circular road that went all around the city as to how big it was maybe 10 years ago. Now there's an outer ring road, which is the second ring that connects all of that back into the main city. And it's like super easy for me to get from one end to the other if I get onto the main highway.
Yeah. So we've done that in my hometown, but so last time I was in London, they literally, because my cousin's a civil engineer,
Hmm.
so they did the I don't know what the name of it is, you might know, the one that goes around London, and they wanted to build another one, and the Queen really came out against it and said, look, in case of war, we need this farmland. We've got to be able to grow our own food, and killed the project.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I mean that was, but it was such a logical argument from a country that's always in war. I mean, you got to be honest. It's like, it isn't like they're going to stop.
They
How do
can
you get good
pretend to
at
have
it?
calmed down.
Right. Yeah, they're not at all. Wow. All right. So I'm interested to see from an infrastructure standpoint, if you look at tiny home projects, because you guys have huge slums, and the only other place I've seen slums like that are in South America, in
Yeah.
like Lima, Peru, and they're lean-tos and everything else. Sooner or later, that has to be made safer for
Hmm.
longevity. And I know people go, well, there's always going to be the poor, and you go, yes, there is, but we're going to eventually. I had literally had this discussion a week ago, and I was like, yes, but if we want them to be tax-paying, productive citizens, they've got to be able to live better than this.
See, Bangalore
So,
has a very left-leaning government right now
oh,
compared to
good.
like technically it's like our governor is kind of the opposite party of the central, kind of
Right.
like the federal. Okay,
Yeah.
so these guys have introduced like really cool schemes to help like people under the poverty line, where they
Right.
give them like they still do rations here. So
Oh, nice.
any family below certain um,
Huh.
income levels, they get like
Right.
10 kilograms of rice, 10 kilograms of this, that, and the other.
Right.
And they also
Yeah.
get like some sort of subsidized version of like gas, which would be kind of like your gas connections for your stoves and stuff.
Yeah. Cooking gas. Right.
Cooking gas.
Huh.
And
Right.
they just implemented something in Bangalore where women can travel for free on any mode of public transport. I don't know whether it's just buses, just to
Oh, wow.
encourage women to like to get them more independent, and rather than the
Okay.
old school subservient being the housewife type of shit that, oh
Right.
dude, the other day I was
Okay.
so furious about. Sorry, can I tell you this?
No, no, go ahead. Hey,
Like
man, we're
there
talking
was
about your country today, not mine.
there was this douchebag at a restaurant I was at. He seemed like he was well educated, like kind of like a software guy. And his
Right.
wife looked like this really timid, quiet person sitting in the
Yeah.
corner. And he was
Right.
just bullying her like in like one of the regional languages. And then he would turn and say something like shitty to his friend in English because I think she didn't speak English. And
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, I just like I was telling my mother
Yeah.
this, and she was like, please don't yell shut the fuck up or something like that to people like that.
I would have been tempted. I would
I
have.
know. I was so tempted to
Jesus.
do that.
Yeah. But then he's probably just going to beat the shit out of her when they get home. So, you
Mm,
don't necessarily help in those situations. Okay. So let me discuss one thing in the article, since that was our topic of conversation, that
yeah.
worries me. So in America,
Mm,
two income families, basically every household now. The very rare circumstance that it's one income. So,
yeah.
but then we wonder why our kids don't behave. This is going to be a huge quandary for you guys. Now you are
Mm,
still living in the 50s where the guy goes out and makes money and mom stays home with the kids. Is it is But by getting all of those women to work, which
mm,
I'm all for. Hey, don't misunderstand me. Anybody listening, I'm all for it. I'm all for women being educated. My mom, her sisters all had master's degrees. I'm good with it. The challenge, though, is who watches the kids, because it ends up being like a state entity. And
mm,
then you get the right of the right of the right people saying, oh, it's not our job to take care of that. And you go, if we want
yeah.
everybody to be productive, it is. That,
Mm,
man, there is a business for you right there, is the interim training. Because, you know, I don't know how that works, because we're still struggling with it in America, for God's sakes.
mm,
So my wife has always worked because she didn't want to hit the glass ceiling. She made her own glass ceiling, owns her own company.
Yeah.
solves the problem. Her company actually does better than mine. I'm totally fine with it, but most men would not be. So tell me what you think that translation looks like. You having lived here, you having lived in the UK, and you presently living in India. How does the transition go from always in charge of the home, always in charge of all of that stuff to how do you get the guys to help out at home if the woman's doing an outside job?
With India, it's really interesting that you brought this up because I was going to tell you. Our culture dictates that usually you live in a household with your parents.
Right.
So a lot of the times when the husband and wife start working, it's the grandparents that take care of the kids.
Right.
Daycares, this is the first time I've seen a lot of them in the neighborhood, but that happens to be most of the people who generally don't have their family that lives in Bangalore.
Right.
But it's really weird to see, like, there's a friend of mine who's a software engineer. His wife is also a software engineer. They both go to work, and the kid stays at home where the grandparents take the kid to school, teach, eat lunch.
That's very Italian of you. Very Italian of you.
It so is
Italians
so
do that. Yeah. The 3-story building, and the grandparents end up on the bottom because they take care of all the kids while everybody's at work, and everybody switches out which floor they live on.
Yeah.
Hey, man, that is ideal, I would say. I don't know why the white Anglo-Saxon culture can't go. We just can't do that. I don't know why. There's something weird about us. Do what?
It's weird, right? Like there are times where even with friends of mine in Oklahoma, like their parents live like down the street, and they'll see them as frequently as I see my mother living in India.
Right. Yeah. It is. Well, so, the way I try to describe that to people, so my wife with our kids always wanted to keep her arms around them, to keep them close and in and involved. So let's look at it like a fence in your front yard. Are you building that fence to keep people in or to keep people out? Our culture is to literally throw them off the roof and see if they can fly as early as you possibly can, knowing it's not going to work for all of them. And hers would never, ever, ever do that. Why would you throw them off the roof? And they seem to do just fine. I mean, they created banking. They were the masters of art and everything else up until the 1700s, and they make really nice cars now. I mean, that's kind of their thing. But I don't know beyond that. They live differently, and their life seems to be better laid out than ours. It would be the way I would say that. But the men, when they're around their moms seem to still baby them a little bit, even though they have wives and children. And I don't know, that's my one caveat. I mean, it really is. It's my one caveat. Yeah. You go, man, dude, that's not cool with your wife, but it's not my culture. So I don't have an opinion. That's just the one thing I see that I go, oh, that's probably a little too much. So, So how does that work with the moms and the in-laws? So do they have that thing like a lot of the Vietnamese, the mother-in-laws are actually kind of mean to the wives? Just a little bit.
Can I tell you, Shad, there is an entire I'm pretty sure most of Indian soap opera daytime TV is just mother-in-law and daughter-in-law dramas. There is nothing else. Like there are times where I'll walk by the living room and I'll turn and look at the telly, and mom would be sitting there looking at something, and she'll just pretend that she wasn't watching that and flip to a news channel the moment she realizes I'm there.
But it's still within her to watch. Yeah, in Vietnam, it's evidently like a cultural thing. Because they end up coming to live with you, and then you got this lady riding your ass all the time, and that just seems to me to bring a lot of animosity where it's not necessary.
Culturally, it's pretty similar here.
Wow, God, that's crazy. And so, like, my mother-in-law was really, really sweet to me, but man, she wasn't very nice to her own kid. But her own kid was a bit of a screw up. So I get it. I mean, they want to be proud of their family and offspring and everything. So how much time do we have left?
We have 4 minutes. Oh, shit, we have just 4 minutes left.
Okay, let me tell you a story before we go. So I am watching this Martin Scorsese movie that is about Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Now, nobody cares right now about it, but once everybody sees this worldwide, these were the richest people in the entire world, and people were coming in and killing them and stealing their oil revenue head rights, meaning you're one of 1,000 people in this tribe. You get 1,000th of the money coming in. So they show the opening of the trailer, and it's Fairfax, Oklahoma, where my mother-in-law is from. And where all the people got killed was Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where my father-in-law was from. And my kid's grandpa was the mayor there that owned a gas station and a hotel. I am legitimately worried that we are going to look like the really, really bad people.
Oh, no. I'm waiting for this.
Yeah. So I have to give a speech in a city called Ponca City this Saturday as this movie is getting ready to come out. And that city is right in between where all of this happened, where Conoco's refinery. Yeah.
If I was
Hey, it's not.
If I was there in Oklahoma right now and I saw that movie, wherever you were standing, I'll just be standing behind you going like, shame, shame.
Shame, this guy right here. But that is the legitimate weirdness of living in this state. Now, my family's not from here, but this is my kids' grandparents and great grandparents. And they were white mostly because they adopted native kids. That's how my kids got the bloodline on it. Now, on the mom's side, it's a little bit of a mix. So they're legit there, but they're from this tribe where the people were killed. They were big old ranchers up there. So, yeah, I'm waiting for the ball to drop on this thing. So did I tell you about Yancey Redcorn, this guy that I know that was in the movie? And he was writing me about some other stuff with the schools and everything. And I said, hey, God, did you know my kid's grandpa from there? And I wrote down that he's never gotten back with me, ever.
Sean, your
know.
kid's grandfather probably did some really shitty things.
Oh,
What's the
I
name
know.
of that movie? Moon.
So it's called the something of the Killer Moon, but it'll be out here like in the next month or two. But it looks spectacular. But
Yeah.
look, I live in a state where the oppressors live with the oppressed, and their grandchildren live with them still. Yeah, and there's Lordy, not good, not good. All right, homie. So we're shooting again Wednesday, right?
Yes, Wednesday. We would do that.
Okay, cool. We're going to talk about the Patriot pastors on Wednesday.
Say, I had an entire outline, but we took so long on one topic that I have like 5 left.
Sorry, man. Hey, you know what? I just find it fascinating that both of us were looking at the same realistic thing of how are we going to feed these people? Where is all the poop going to go?
Are we just the buzzkills in life, Sean? Where we're just looking at all the shit that can go wrong when people tell us a good piece of news. First thing that crossed my mind when they told me that India was going to be like number 2 in 2075, I'll be like, I just looked at someone and I was like, oh shit, I'll be dead by then. Who gives a fuck? And I walked out.
So, hey man, I just look at it and go, being the biggest isn't the best. You know, that just means money is in control of everything at that point. Not that it isn't already, but you know, look, we've made some huge mistakes here in America, and we can't even fess up to making them, much less fucking fixing them. You know, I mean, it's a great country, it's a great idea, everything else. You guys are transferring from an old country to a new country, and that's even weirder.
Yeah. I think this last section, because we're less than a minute, I can use as the intro for the entire show since we seem to have wrapped it up.
All right, my man. Well, hey, I appreciate the call. It's good to talk to you again. And tonight I've got the crazies coming to City Council. So if I'm alive on Wednesday, we're going to have a great show.
Done.
These are legit crazies. So I'll have some good stories.